this is the mitochondria. So as you know that this organelle is in charge of ATP synthesis in the cell. Now let's take a look at inside and we shall see how they can convert oxygen and the glucose that we eat into ATP. We actually ingest macronutrients such as carbohydrates, fats and proteins, and they are all oxidized to form carbon dioxide. But through this series of biochemical reactions, electrons are produced. So electrons are then carried or received by electron carriers such as nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, which is NADH. So you can see over here a pair of electrons. Then the NADH will just bring the electrons to the electron transport chain. As you can see over here, this is complex 1, right? Complex 1 is actually NADH dehydrogenase. Complex 3 over here is also known as cytochrome BC1 complex. And cytochrome C oxidase is complex 4 over here. So the electron will actually go to complex 1 first, then you go to complex 3, and then complex 4. And through this passing of electrons from one complex to another, protons will actually flow through. Let's just see in detail. The 2 electrons from NADH, they go to complex 1 first. But through this process, as you can see over here, 4 hydrogen ions are being pumped across the inner membrane, the inner mitochondrial membrane, into the intermembrane space. Then the NADH is reoxidized to NAD+. So the NAD+ is actually regenerated in order to get more electrons. And as new NADH arrives, more and more electrons will be passed. This over here is ubiquinone. It is also known as the electron carrier. It transports electrons from one complex to another, namely complex 1 to complex 3. So you can see the overview here: complex 1, complex 2, complex 3, and complex 4. And this is ubiquinone, also known as coenzyme Q10. So this shuttling between complex 1 and complex 3 of electrons is known as the Q cycle. Over here, complex 2, also known as succinate dehydrogenase, is actually receiving electrons from FADH2. But for the purpose of this presentation, we'll just focus on complex 1, 3, and 4. So this is actually complex 3, right? So as it shuttles electrons across, 4 more hydrogen plus ions are being transported into the intermembrane space. But after that, there's more electrons will actually go to the cytochrome C oxidase. So you see, 1 will go over, which result in the first hydrogen ion, right? And the second electron will also go over, and then it will result in the second hydrogen ion being crossing over. So you can see 4, 4, 1, and 1 more. So in total, a pair of electrons would shuttle 10 hydrogen plus ions. This will result in a small drop in pH in the intermembrane space and also a slight rise in charge. So this generates the chemiosmotic gradient, which also generates the proton motive force, which is necessary for oxidative phosphorylation. This is the proton motive force will then be coupled to the ATP synthase in order to create ATP. As you can see over here, this is ATP. After the electrons have been passed from complex 1 to complex 4, it has to go to the final electron carrier, or the final electron acceptor, which is known as oxygen molecule. So oxygen molecule will combine 4 electrons and 4 protons to form 2 molecules of water, as you can see from here. And that's how the electrons are being linked to proton, and how protons are being linked to generation of ATP.